Good afternoon, or good morning, everybody, depending on where you are joining us from. It is really, really good to see so many people from across the continent, and I believe even across the world. We had some participants joining us from India as well, so that's really great. Just a few housekeeping rules before we start. You will see on the bottom, you should have the option or a series of options. There's a chat option. So please, would you mind introducing yourself and your name, your surname, your organization, if you are associated with an organization, and even adding your country where you're from would be great. So please do that in the chat box. And then you'll see that there's also a Q&A box as well. So please, if you have any questions for the video players, please type your questions in there. So how we will run it is we will play a video submission from a student, and then we will open the floor to Q&A for that particular video. So if you could, during the video or just afterwards, either type your question as a text question in there. We will then read the question out loud for the video creator to then answer. Or if you would like to ask a live question, please could I ask you just to type live question, and then we will unmute you so that you can ask your question live, and hopefully we will get a response from the video player. So yeah, I think in terms of housekeeping rules, that is all. I'm going to hand over now to Alana to share her screen and take us through the updates for the SWS-Africa chapter. Yeah, so Alana, over to you. And thanks all for coming. It's great to be here.
Great. Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. I'm just going to ask if the administrators can please mute the mics of all the panelists except myself, just so that we don't have any interruptions.
I'll do so.
Wonderful, thank you. Great, so my name's Alana, and welcome to our webinar today. I'm going to just share my screen. If I can just have Mark confirm that he can see the right screen.
Yes, we can, Alana.
Presentation. Great, thank you. So yeah, welcome to our webinar, a joint webinar hosted by the South African Wetland Society and also SWS-Africa. And we're calling it a tour of wetland student research in Africa. And we're hoping to give a little bit of a taster of different wetland ecosystems and research that's happening around our beautiful continent. So just in brief, what are we planning to do in this hour and a half that we have together? I'm going to start with introducing our panelists and the facilitators, and then just a brief look at the program. In short, today we're going to be having a bit of a feedback session from SWS Africa. I am the chair of SWS Africa, and so I'll keep it quite short, just 15 minutes, reporting back on what we've been busy with the last few years, as well as looking forward. What have we got coming up? And then we're going to jump into our videos and interviews that we've prepared today for our tour of African student research in wetlands. We're going to end with a general question and answer session. So don't worry, you'll all get a chance to ask the questions that you have. So please do keep those coming thick and fast using the question and answer function in this webinar. So just a brief introduction to the two societies. As mentioned, I'm the current chair for the Africa region of the Society of Wetland Scientists. The Society of Wetland Scientists is international. It's a society that spans the whole globe. It started in America, so it has a whole lot of different chapters that represent different geographic regions across the world. Europe has a chapter, America has many different chapters, there's an Asian chapter, and so on. at the moment, Africa unfortunately falls into a bit of a bin chapter, which is called International Chapter. There are two big regions within this, Africa and Latin America. And this means that there are two co-chairs which share the leadership of that. The one is a chair for the LAC region, and then the one is the chair for the Africa region. So that's just a little bit of an introduction to our chapter within the society. And the other society here today is the South African Wetland Society. So for my colleagues joining from abroad, this is our national wetland society, and they are very active in South Africa. And they are our hosts today. Let me just put that up. Okay, so this is the South African Wetland Society. Then what we hope to cover today, just a brief taste of the program. We're going to be showing a series of videos and interviews from some students across Africa. They are 5 panelists, and they're also the winners of a competition that we ran in 2023, which was a competition to get free membership of SWS, and to win this competition, people had to submit a short video under 3 minutes describing their work and their wetland. So it's very exciting to be able to share the outcome of that today. After that, we're going to shift slightly away from student work to a video from South Africa that's entitled The Plight of South Africa's Peculiar Peatlands. And we're very pleased to have Dr. Vriending here today, who will be fielding questions for that particular film. After that, we'll end with a general question and answer session. So to introduce our speakers, you've met Stephen and myself, your facilitators today, each representing one of the 2 societies. And then our guest I've mentioned, Dr. Althea Vriending, who will be fielding questions for the peatland film. But I'm very pleased to introduce our panelists to you today. We have Dr. Crispo Babila Dinga from Cameroon. He unfortunately is not likely to be able to make it. We'll see if he does, but we have his pre-recorded video and his answers to some questions to share with you. We also have Sharon Nze from Cameroon, who is a PhD student studying wetlands in Cameroon. And yeah, we've got her video to show today as well. We have Shaima Hamana, who's a PhD student from Algeria, currently based in Spain. And we have a video and a pre-recorded interview with her to share with you. Next up, we have Damaris Keisha from Kenya. And likewise, we have her video clip and recorded interview. And she is with us online this morning. And then we have Tsepo Sekaledi from Lesotho, and he's also online with us live here today. So these are our speakers and panelists today. So I'm going to then jump right in, now that I've introduced everybody, to the SWS-Africa Society, starting with a little bit of a report back of what we've been up to. So firstly, when I started in around middle of the year 2022, one of the first things that I did was apply for the chapter development grant. We were successful in receiving this, but of course, because our chapter is rather big, we had to divide it between the 2 regions. But the amount that we got was pretty substantial. And we proposed to do some things with that money. And a lot of what I showed today was funded by that. The students' free membership, as well as a training course that we're going to be running. Other activities, we hosted a workshop at the National Wetland Indaba, that's what NWI stands for there, in 2022. And it was very well attended. This is a photograph from that workshop. And the workshop was really about what do people want to see happening in this society. And yeah, it was very, very helpful in paving the way forward. Maybe there are people here on this call that were there in 2022. Then in Nigeria, we also have a very active group of people that are championed by excellence. And he is a senior lecturer at the University of Lagos. His picture is actually this one over here. And he does quite a bit in Nigeria to raise awareness about wetlands. So he's also a member of the Society for Ecological Restoration, and he organized this webinar, which was a collaboration between that society and SWS-Africa. And it had a number of different speakers, all presenting on their wetland work. And it was very well attended within Nigeria online. And then another thing we've been busy with is building a committee. So this chair role has typically been quite a solitary role in the past. And also quite, I would say, based in South Africa. And so one of the things I wanted to do was to build a bit of a team around me so that it wasn't just me doing things, especially since I don't know anything about the rest of Africa. So I put out a call for people who would be interested to join the committee, and a bunch of people replied, and we've been working quite closely together ever since then, and it is just the most incredible group of people. If you're ever looking for people to work with from these countries, I highly recommend this group of people. So who are they? I've mentioned Dr. Dinga Crispo Babila already. He's from Cameroon. Dr. Excellence is from Nigeria. Yakulet and Willem from South Africa. And then Peter from Lesotho and Prof. Bismarck from Ghana. Yeah, and it's been, so there's actually a little bit of a pocket from West Africa, Ghana, Nigeria, Cameroon, and this is why we decided to focus on that region. And this is where we've had most of the champions and the interest for this particular society. So in terms of the committee also looking forward, just to ensure that we don't just keep the chair for this society or this region within the society, just within South Africa, trying to see whether a different country could take up the chair position in the future. So Dr. Babila is considering taking on the chair position in 2 years' time, and he's working closely with me to be able to succeed into that role. We then put out a membership challenge where students could win membership worth $10, and this is what we'll be looking at today, the results of this. And then we also organized a joint webinar with the South African Wetland Society, which you're all participating in today. And here's the beautiful flyer that Stephen put together. We've also put together a 8-page proposal to host one of the International Society's annual meetings in South Africa. The proposal was for 2026, which is pretty soon. And we still haven't heard back, and I've been following up very aggressively. So whether this happens or not, we at least have the proposal and we could pull it out at any stage for a future meeting. And I think it would be quite important to try and get one of the annual meetings on the continent sometime soon. We've also created a little website. It's just a free Google site. Here's the address in case you'd like to go and take a look. But we just introduce who we are, who the committee is, and you can read up a little bit about each of those members or committee members. We have a list of our upcoming events, and then a whole page dedicated to a big training event that's coming up soon. More on that in a minute. So that's what we've achieved in the last 2 years, or not even 2 years. What are we planning to do going ahead? Well, all of our efforts at this stage are bent on a big training event that we are hoping to host in Nigeria in October. We first put out a call to anyone willing to host this event in Africa, not in South Africa, because we already run quite a lot of training in South Africa, and yeah, that's all going very well without our help. But there are other places where people don't have the same opportunities, and so we got one proposal, and that was from Excellence in Nigeria to host this at his university in Lagos. They actually have a lot of wetlands on campus in Lagos. And this is our course flyer, and this is just a little picture from the campus, and you can see how the campus is really surrounded by and built into the wetlands. So very interesting location for this. And so this is all very far along in the planning. those of you on the call today, there are ways that you could support if you're able to. We would really like to spread the word across, particularly West Africa, because it's really relatively easy for people in that region to get to the course. And then also just for people to think about actually attending. In South Africa, we have quite a strong wetlands community of practice, but my colleagues from West Africa tell me that it's quite different there. People tend to not specialize in wetland science. They tend to be more generalist, so working as ecologists that then also manage wetland systems, or ditto with research. And so there's really a need to actually build up the whole community of practice and actually get people interested from the ground up. And the only way we're really going to conserve these special wetland systems across Africa is building that capacity and getting people interested. So yeah, really, if you know ecologists who maybe at some point interact with wetlands in the rest of Africa, particularly West Africa, please let them know about this opportunity. We're also looking for sponsors for just small things like the meal, the teas and things like that. So the course is already heavily sponsored by the chapter development grants. I would say it's about 70% covered by that. But I'm not sure if everybody's aware of the severe economic recession that West Africa is facing right now, and the challenges that our fellow wetland scientists are facing at the universities. People are incredibly overworked. The burnout is incredibly high. And I was told that even the price that we made the tickets for, already being 70% subsidized, is something that people could barely even dream of ever paying for. People are struggling basically just to put food on the table at this point. So there is interest, but there's just some major challenges that I think we don't really face in the same way in South Africa, perhaps. So we do need sponsorship, even of simple things like the teas and lunches and things like that. So if you know any particularly commercial companies that might want to sponsor something like a wetlands training event, yeah, please do let us know. And we also then, on the flip side, are trying to see if we can sponsor everybody to attend. And so if you are listening to this and you're from the region, please do apply to attend and apply for sponsorship if the cost is prohibitive. So that's our big training event. Maybe also just to mention before I move on, that it's a 3-day course, and it's going to be run by Ground Truth. And yeah, covering themes like drivers of wetlands, wetland identification and classification, ecosystem services of wetlands, applying tools to do various types of assessments, a brief introduction to rehabilitation, and very importantly, also covering GIS skills, so that people that leave the course will be able to do some basic desktop assessments. And it will also include a fields component, so people will get to go into the fields, into the wetlands at the University of Lagos, and actually try some of the things out themselves. So yeah, it's some very exciting content there. And just so that people have an understanding, the wish list of what the content should be didn't come from Ground Truth. It came from my committee, and particularly from West Africa, what people thought would be very important there. And so yeah, the course in a sense was the topics to be covered was developed by people on the ground in that region, and then Ground Truth is going to teach into those topics. Okay, so if you have any ideas or suggestions, or if you'd like to join us or get involved, please just reach out to me. Here's my email address. I'd love to chat. Great. So without further ado, that's it from me and from the society. If there are any questions and answers, we'll pick it up in the general Q&A at the end. So please do feel free to put them in the Q&A block. I just want to briefly introduce the videos, and then I'm going to hand over to Stephen. So I've introduced the people. So those are the names in black, and then the countries in green, in case you need a refresher. But just briefly, this is the order that we're going to be going in. We're going to start in Kenya with Damaris, and we're going to hear about the endangered grey-crowned crane and the wetlands that are used there. Then we're going to switch to Cameroon and hear about fostering the sustainable use and management of wetlands in Bamenda. Then coming south to Lesotho, we're going to hear a little bit about the highland peatlands of Lesotho. And then we're going to go back up north to Cameroon and hear about anthropogenic activities on raffia palm and wetland dynamics also in Bamenda. And then we're going to end off in Algeria and hear a little bit about Shaima and her research interests related to her wetlands there. So yeah, without further ado, I'll hand over to Stephen.
Amazing, thank you. I'm just going to load up the first video, but just a reminder, if you do have questions for the video, basically the panelists, please do pop them into the Q&A box.
Hello, my name is Damaris Kisha. I work for the International Crane Foundation, which partners with Endangered Wildlife Trust. I am a Kenyan, and we work to conserve the endangered grey-crowned crane and the habitats they use. And behind me is Ondago Swamp, which is one of the habitats that the grey-crowned crane have found or use as their habitat. And Ondago Swamp is found in Homa Bay County, which is in western part of Kenya, and it was gazetted in 1997 as an important bird sanctuary. And by that time it was having an extent of around 45 acres, but due to the human activities and encroachment that is happening in this place, Ondago Swamp now measures around 24.8 acres. And this is attributed to these different activities that is happening. And one of them, as we can see, is human encroachment, where the communities living around are constructing houses into the wetland. Part of that land that their houses is in the wetland. Another activities that are happening in this place that is raising concern for the different stakeholders and the communities around is grazing, whereby both the communities around and even people coming from other places are bringing their cattle, including cows and sheep and even donkeys, to graze in this wetland. We all know that wetlands function perfectly when they are under minimal disturbance, but with the different activities that are happening in this place, we can ascertain that the functioning of the wetland has reduced. And this has also affected the biodiversity that it used to hold back in 2015. And by then, Ondago Swamp had 15 grey-crowned crane which were resident in this place, and more than 20 other bird species. But of today, as we speak, Ondago Swamp hosts only 2 pairs of endangered grey-crowned crane. And that is what has called us as International Crane Foundation to work hand in hand with the community and with other stakeholders who have interest in wetland conservation and the general environmental conservation to see how best we can work to protect and to conserve Ondago Swamp for the betterment of the biodiversity as well as for the provision of other ecosystem goods and services.
Whereabouts
Good to hear from you.
are you calling us from?
I'm calling from Kenya, a county called Homa Bay County, that is along the Lake Victoria region.
So you're working for the International Crane Foundation, is that right?
Yes. So we work it's a partner organization, basically. So there is a partnership between International Crane Foundation and the Endangered Wildlife Trust, which has its headquarters in South Africa. And there is also a local organization that hosts now the two, which is called Community Action for Nature Conservation. Okay. So as a team, we are under the Community Action for Nature Conservation under a Department of Wetlands and Water.
Okay, amazing.
Yeah.
And how is it that you came to be where you are? Were you always passionate or interested in the environment or birds specifically, or is this a later interest that's come?
Okay, so basically my background, maybe going to my educational background, for my Bachelor's of Science, I did environmental science. And from this environmental science course, I developed an interest in wetlands. So in my early career work, I started volunteering with the county government. By then I was in Trans Nzoia, some other part of Kenya. But I volunteered for the county government for at least 3 months. Then later on is when I joined this team under the Kipsaina. By then it was Kipsaina Crane and Wetland Conservation Program, which was working with communities on saving the endangered grey-crowned crane. So I also started volunteering with them with the aspect of wetlands, with my love for wetlands. So I found myself in the Kipsaina Crane and Wetland Conservation Group, and I worked for them for a period of 9 months as a volunteer. Then a post was advertised to look for a research assistant who would help the organization go around the counties in western part of Kenya to identify the areas where the cranes use. So I did a survey between 2019 to around 2021 across about 11 counties, just looking for those sites where the cranes are using. And so Homa Bay came in as one of the important areas where we saw significant number of cranes, and the program decided to upscale to this area so that we can save the population. Yeah, so basically the background is I love wetlands, and I have a passion towards wetlands. So anything that deals with wetland, be it the biodiversity, be it the support that it gives to the communities, I am really interested in that. Yeah, sure.
What are the people's perceptions of the grey-crowned crane? I mean, they're a beautiful bird to see, and with their striking colors and their incredible crown. Do people have a positive reaction to them, communities, or is it kind of we don't really care, or is it positive? Do you know?
Yeah, so for the 1 year that I've worked in Homa Bay, we are still at the inception period, and we have had a chance to engage with the communities and just learn of their perceptions towards the bird. One thing is for the communities of this area, they didn't have they did have that sort of close relation to the birds. They would just see the grey-crowned cranes just like any other bird. So until we came in and we started telling them that the species is dwindling in terms of population, then that is what now struck their opinion towards the bird. But for farmers, they see them as a threat to their crops because they also have some level of decrease to crop damage. But to other community members, they were just seeing them as birds. And one thing that we are really trying to do is creating the awareness to the community, not just to see them as any other species, but to know that they're also facing some threats which makes them endangered. And if nothing is done, then probably they will go into extinction. Yeah, so there's the both parts of the coin. There's a population that, especially those ones who are enlightened, they know the species, but those very local communities, honestly speaking, they have no idea. They just see the birds as, yeah, just like any other birds. Yeah.
In your professional opinion, do you feel like there is hope for the grey-crowned crane?
Indeed, there is.
Great.
And where this is coming from is, I come from a point of, if you let people know, then they will help in the conservation. So, and unless they know, then there will be no hope. But if we make them understand that there is need to conserve, for instance, the wetlands which the cranes depend on, then I see a lot of hope. Yeah.
Amazing. I'm really, really glad to hear that. And then I suppose a final question. In all of this, in all of these hopeful stories, and the plight of the grey crown crane is a very special one, I think, to many in South Africa, and to many in Kenya as well. Do you have maybe a short message of that you would share with the broader African wetland community at large about the work that you're doing, or maybe even just something that you are passionate about that you would like other people to know about? Do you have anything that comes forth from within you?
Yeah, for the broader community, and especially now the wetland community, I would say that we all understand the enormous benefits that the wetlands provide. And despite these benefits that we get from the wetlands, as well as the communities depending on them, there are also threats that come with them. So to the broader community, I'll just urge each and everyone to put our efforts forth so that we can see the wetlands at least coming back to their being, to support the communities sustainably, as well as to support the biodiversity that depend on them, the grey crown crane being one of them. So I'm just calling all of us to have that collaborative effort from whatever spheres we are coming from, the hydrology aspect, maybe the vegetation aspect, and all these. If we put our efforts together and we engage the community and the relevant parties, then we can speak of success stories at the end of the day. Yeah, so that is just my message out there. That, as they say, that the earth has enough for all of us, but not for our greed. So we all embrace what we can get from the universe and what the environment can give, and also try to tame the greed that maybe the community could be having to just be extracting from the environment and not knowing that the future generation also will depend on this environment as well.
I'm just going to let that sink in for a minute. Wow, thank you. I get the sense that you would support the idea of collaboration over competition.
Sure.
And I think that's such a wonderful thing a wonderful way to close this interview off. So, Damaris, thank you so much for your time and for your collaborative spirit. It's really great to have met you, and I look forward to working with you in the future. Thank you, Damaris. Next, we are going to have a look at Dr. Crispo Dinga, and I will load that up. And just a note about that interview, it was a subset of a longer interview that Damaris and I had. And if you are interested in that full interview, we can make that available after the webinar as well.
You are welcome to this presentation on fostering the sustainable use and management of wetlands in Bamenda, Cameroon by Dr. Crispo Babila. Wetlands in Bamenda are mostly made up of riparian areas and floodplains, which, especially in urban and peri-urban areas, they are transformed or reclaimed for infrastructure construction, as we can see to the left and to the top right. It is also used in these areas or transformed in this area into fish ponds, as we can see to the bottom right. In this area, these fish ponds are littered around wetlands, with some integrated with fish ponds as which poultry farming as we can find in these herds, where the droppings are directly used by table birds. Also, in terms of utilization, wetlands in these areas are used for the cultivation of several crops, including huckleberry, maize, beans, cocoyams, and cabbages. This is the case with these areas which are recently being cultivated and crops planted, and here we have buoyant crops already growing on wetlands. This is another dimension of utilization. With such exploitation, it is realized that wetlands are under pressure from urbanization and agriculture, as the exploitation have led to their degradation. As such, it is necessary to improve the wise use of these wetlands. Therefore, the aim of my research is to develop a management approach that is adapted to local conditions in Bamenda to ensure sustainability. With this, I have specific objectives such as analyzing the spatiotemporal dynamics of wetlands based on GIS methods to assess community-based valuation of wetland ecosystem services, investigate institutions and approaches that are engaged in wetland management, as well as examine the environmental implications of degradation, as well as constraints to wise use and management options. These are some of the outputs from my research work with two of these papers, one published in the Istanbul Journal of Geography and the Journal of Arts and Humanity of the University of Bamenda. I really look forward to further engaging in wetland work with other wetlands.
Great. So that was Dinka's presentation. And since he has made that presentation, he has graduated with his PhD. Yeah, so that's very exciting. And he is still based in Cameroon. So he hasn't been able to join us, as I mentioned earlier. So I asked him a few questions in advance of this meeting, and I'm just going to share his answers. And please, I ask if you do have questions for him, put them in the chat, and we can always send them to him and connect you afterwards. He also asks that if people want to reach out to him, you can just contact me for his email address. So I was asking him a little bit more about these wetlands and if he could describe them, and he described them as riparian wetlands. I also asked him, is there anything unique or special about these wetlands? What sort of animals or birds might we expect to find there? And he shared that the endemic Turako bird can be spotted in some peripheral areas of this wetland. So I'm not sure how many people are familiar with birds. I certainly am not, so I had to Google it to look. And this is the one, the Turako from Cameroon, which apparently is endemic. So yeah, quite a stunning bird. So apparently in some peripheral areas you might see this if you're lucky. He also mentioned other species, cattle egrets, and he mentioned the Clipperton spur fowl. It's spelled many different ways, yeah, so I hope I'm pronouncing it right, but this is this particular spur fowl. So yeah, also interesting sights in terms of the birds. I also asked him, we've seen some pictures in his talk which show quite a lot of degradation of these wetland systems. And I asked, what is the local perception of wetlands? Oasis of life and water, or do they see it as, because of all the degradation, a conduit of, poor water quality and disease? And his answer was that to the local people, these wetlands are an important oasis, mainly because of the livelihood activities like agriculture that they derive from the wetlands. But he said that it appears that the notion of wetlands as wastelands still prevail, owing to the massive degradation of these systems, largely waste disposal and reclamation. So that's a little bit sad. And hopefully these perceptions and practices can be shifted thanks to the good work of people in Cameroon, like Dinga and Sharon. And then I asked him just to tell us a little bit more about his research and the different methods that he used. And he said that he's also done some remote sensing and mapping to understand wetland changes. And he's also done so to try and initiate community engagement activities through things like workshops with local people and decision makers in order to show how things have changed, but also understand their interests and perspectives in order to achieve sustainable management of these wetlands. So that's very exciting and sounds quite similar to some of the things we're doing here in South Africa and things that we have planned. Also working with local communities and local farmers to understand their interests and perspective so that we can achieve sustainable management of our wetlands. And lastly, I asked what actually got you interested in wetland science in the first place, especially given this perception that people don't usually go into it as a discipline. Was it a mentor at school or university? And his response was that perhaps it was his childhood visit to a rice paddy field with his aunt. And thereafter, realizing at university during his undergraduate studies, realizing about the diverse and important value of these, what he calls wonderlands. So yeah, very nice to hear about the impact of his aunt on his career direction. So yes, that's everything from Dinga. Thank you very much for listening and for the questions that will come. I'm going to hand back now to Stephen for the next video.
Great, thank you. The next video is from Lesotho, and that is from Tsepo Sekaledi.
Yeah, hello everyone. This is Tsepo. I'm in the highlands of Lesotho, the Maluti Mountains. So presently, the location that I'm at now, it's a study area, one of my study areas. It's a wetland. So we are busy installing piezometers now. If you can look behind me here, all of this area here is a wetland, and it's one of those wetlands that I think it's degraded when I compare it with the other one that I worked on last time when I was here. So we are busy installing piezometers and wells this week, and I hope this work will be a success and will inform everyone in terms of the potential hazards of erosion and other degrading factors in this wetland here. So this is the whole wetland within this catchment. There's a road just above the wetland there, and then there are culverts that are directing water into this wetland. I think that's where most of the erosion is happening. So yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. Mark, can I ask you please to allow my video again? And then I believe that Tsepo is online with us and will be able to answer questions. So I think while we wait for some questions to come in, Tsepo, I wanted to ask you, you mentioned that you are installing piezometers and wells in that particular wetland.
Yes.
Can you explain what the function of those piezometers are, and what exactly are you measuring?
So what we want to really find out is the seasonal water changes in terms of how the wetland responds in terms of water level, and also the flow, whether this wetland is sustained by rainfall or is it sustained by groundwater. So the piezometers will help us in terms of finding out whether this wetland is able to get water from underground or groundwater. Is it flowing upwards to recharge the wetland? Or is it this wetland solely sustained by precipitation? So we want to find out those kind of hydrological measures for the rainy season as well as the dry season. So that's the basic functions of those.
Okay, amazing. And tell me, you mentioned that you had worked in another wetland nearby, and that it was in a more pristine or in a better condition. In your experience, what are the main drivers of negative ecological change in wetlands in Lesotho at the moment?
So what I've seen is one of the drivers of degradation is the impact of those roads. So those culverts are driving water into the wetlands, and then it's eroding in terms of gully development. But also there's also overgrazing there in our highlands, where headers overgraze and overstock those wetlands because that's where most of the green vegetation or grasses are found. So those are the two main factors. But also there's also the other aspect of it, which is the impact of ice rats. So these ice rats, they burrow through the wetland, especially where it's desiccated, and then when it rains, that develops into tunnels, which actually escalate into bigger gullies. So even where there are no roads, like I said, you'd still find that these wetlands are eroded. And I think probably because of that impact of overgrazing, which actually destroys or takes much of the vegetation from the soil. I think that's what really erodes these wetlands.
And just knowing, knowing that the Lesotho is known as the Mountain Kingdom, I know that there are a lot of very steep slopes where if there is defoliation of vegetation, I'm sure that the erosion will follow.
Yeah.
Then maybe one final question before we move on. What are the major needs in Lesotho? Do you think that will contribute positively towards wetland conservation? Do you think that there's need for wetland rehabilitation specifically, or is it more investment into research or students, or just generally building a wetland field of practice, or anything else?
Well, I think what really needs to happen is we have to go to communities, especially the head boys and the headers, talk to them of the values of these wetlands because they know them for their own livestock. But if we don't give them much awareness of how overgrazing and overstocking those wetlands can impact on the wetlands for future, then I think that would be important in terms of opening up their awareness. And then I also think that we need to really do more research because it's really limited. think the last person who has really been doing much of the research has been Peter Chatanga, whom I'm really following closely. And so in that aspect as well, I think if we could have more of the research done in these wetlands in terms of how can we really conserve them, because you would know that it's really the water towers of our country where this water is collected into the Tatsi Dam and then goes to other regions, other countries, especially South Africa. So we create realities out of those, the impact of these wetlands in terms of holding water and then releasing it slowly into the Tatsi Dam. So if they get eroded and then it loses that ability to hold water because of the pit which has been also desiccated or eroded, I think we'll lose that value, that importance of the wetlands. So that's where also policy comes in. Or that's where government also has to implement policies that will really make sure that these wetlands are conserved and then rehabilitated. So I remember there was this other wetland where I've also worked on. They actually rehabilitated the wetland, but there's no study as of when I speak whether that wetland is restored or it has really been rehabilitated in terms of its functionality of hydrology, in terms of vegetation, in terms of the soil physical properties. So there's no study as yet of whether that work where the wetland was rehabilitated has really achieved that objective. So I think there's a lot to be done. And like you said, if we also have a community of researchers, a community of scientists who are really interested in the peatlands of Lesotho, I think that would go a long way in terms of making sure that they are conserved and then they don't lose their hydrological abilities and other functions that they have.
Thank you, Tsepo. And indeed, I think similar to what we heard from Damaris, there's an element of needing to focus on collaboration over competition, especially, because we in South Africa rely quite heavily on the water that comes from Lesotho and from the Mountain Kingdom. So thank you for sharing your very valuable insight, and all the best with your studies in the future. We're going to now move on to... Yeah, thank you, Tsepo. We're going to move on back to Cameroon. And we have I believe, a student of Dr. Dinga, who you saw a video of prior to this latest one. And this is a video from Sharon Nze, who is also studying wetlands in the Bamenda area in Cameroon.
Anthropogenic activities and wetland dynamics in Bamenda 3 subdivision in the northwest region of Cameroon. The objective of this study is to examine the drivers of raffia palm exploitation and wetland dynamics in Bamenda 3 subdivision. And the second objective is to investigate the spatiotemporal changes in wetland dynamics, spatiotemporal changes in wetlands and raffia palms in Bamenda 3 subdivision. We all know that wetlands harbor a lot of plants and animals which are very vital for human, the environment, and climate. It is very vital. And raffia palm, on its part, is a floristic plant that grows mostly in the tropical and subtropical regions of the world where it is predominant. This plant is actually a multi-used plant in this area because it is harvested from the roots to the leaves for livelihood sustainability. According to Kumga et al., raffia palm is a wellspring of biological diversity, for it has a lot to offer to the local population and the environment. The study made use of a documentary review and field survey, and all that were analyzed using SPSS, Microsoft Word, Microsoft Excel, ArcGIS technology, GPS, and presented on graphs, charts, and maps. Results from field survey revealed that drivers the first objective of the study, which was drivers of raffia palm exploitation. The first driver of raffia palm exploitation was settlement expansion. The local population now reclaim these wetlands, cut down the raffia palms for shelter. The second driver is agricultural expansion. The local population encroach into this area for agriculture and to make use of the water that is there for irrigation, especially during the dry season. And the third one is rapid population increase. The population in this area have doubled within the past years. And so they seek for extra food, extra income. And so they harvest raffia palm. The raffia palm is harvested from the root to the leaves, and the parts are sold to raise money for livelihood sustainability. And the second objective was the spatiotemporal changes reveals that wetlands and raffia palm in this area have actually reduced by 60%. So most raffia palms are a shadow of themselves. To conclude, the government, the local population, the local authorities, the chiefs, the students, everybody has to put hand in deck to preserve wetlands and raffia palms in this area because they are very vital for human survival, for livelihood sustainability, for the environment, for plants and animals. Thank you for your keen attention.
Great. Yeah, so that's was such a fantastic and interesting presentation. And I just wanted to emphasize like how that short little video clip, how difficult it was to produce. I see that Dinga has joined online, which is fantastic. But just some of the context there, I mean, in some case, they even need to use solar panels to be able to charge equipment. We tried, I think, about 3 takes to take that short video. And in the end, Dinga actually had to help take that video. Sharon's based in quite a remote area. And yeah, it was just incredibly challenging. And I think it's quite eye-opening to see something that maybe for us here in South Africa isn't so difficult to do somewhere else where there's no secure electricity supply most of the time. And where there are other significant economic challenges, yeah, you just really realize, I think, the disproportionate challenges that researchers in some other countries have to deal with. So yeah, please do go ahead and ask your questions. Sharon's not able to be here today for those same reasons that I've just outlined. So we can pass on your questions to her and make sure that she is not left out and she is able to participate. So if you've got burning questions, please do send them in the question and answer block. I think I just want to take maybe 1 minute because of time and just invite Dinga to unmute. And maybe you could just tell us a little bit about Sharon, because we've now moved on to her talk. Is she one of your students, Dinga? I believe she's a PhD student. Is that correct? Hi, Dinga. I see you did unmute for a second there.
Yeah, Alana.
Yeah, I can hear you. Hello, welcome.
Thank you. Sorry for coming in this time. Like I said, I noted I was in a very long meeting since 7 a.m. in my time.
Yeah, we have noted it. And
here, so I'm just coming back.
Thank you.
Yeah, so you were saying I breaked off. You were like finding out something.
Yes, I was just asking about Sharon. Is she one of your students and PhD level or master's level?
Yeah, Sharon is a master's student in the Department of Geography and Planning in the University of Bamenda, my own university, and same department.
Mm-hmm.
She was unable to join.
Yes, she's unable to be here today.
Oh,
yeah, that's.
I would have followed. it's just no worries. But Sharon is a PhD student. She's currently working on a PhD thesis on the raffia palms again, but rather in the whole division in this region. So she's trying to work towards the conservation of these raffia palms in this area, and to be able to come out with some practical solutions to see how the conservation can work. Because obviously in the local area here, the raffia palms are really very important resources, because most of our traditional activities are done with the parts from the raffia palm. The wine itself is what traditional marriages can't hold here without palm wine, which comes mostly from raffia palms, and then so many other things that they use for arts and crafts, so from raffia palms. So with the expansion of the urban area, population increase, like she mentioned, those are the drivers of degradation of raffia palms. So I think in 2020, when we were designing for the research proposal, so I think we were under the same supervisor, so he saw the need, rather than looking at the broader wetlands, we saw the need to single out that particular species to really deepening. So that's a brief that I can tell the audience about Sharon's work, but it's rather unfortunate she's not here.
Yeah, thank you, Dinga. No, it's great to have some representation from Cameroon. Thank you. And just real quick, you've mentioned raffia palm degradation. So has anybody mapped the decline in that species? Like, I assume you've observed the decline. Is there any risk, do you think, of it being like completely lost in that area, or is it just really declining? How serious do you think the risk is?
Yeah, there is a serious risk for complete loss of in the urban area. So there is a serious risk for that, and as it is being lost in the urban area, the pressure is drifting back to the rural to expand both in the whole region, to see what is the dynamics that is happening in the rural area. Because one thing was noticed when during field work some years back, there are specific commercialization spots for these raffia palm products in the urban center, e.g. the bamboos itself. There are places where it is sold in the urban center. So the bamboo products like mats and so many others, they have specific spots that they are being sold in the urban area. So now the interesting question is, if the rate in the urban area is degrading at this pace that we observed, even using satellite images and more observation in the field, where they are being cut down to give space for urban agriculture, for construction, and then we have these hubs, which at any point you get there, you get those raffia resources there. So where are they coming from? So what is happening to where those resources are coming from? And given the demand in the urban center that is often increasing because of the construction of makeshift houses, sheds and others for this. So that's an interesting thing. But in the urban area, it is at high risk. And we think subjectively now that even in the rural area, there is some degree of threat, that it is important to move out to see what is happening and the dynamics. And then through that process, we can be able to raise awareness about the need to look into what is happening and then get the decision makers on deck.
Thank you. That's absolutely fascinating. Thank you, Dinga. And I'd love to invite you to stay on if you're able to for the general Q&A at the end. And then, because there's a question for you in the chat, which you're welcome to look at so long, or in the Q&A box. So yes, thank you, Dinga. And I think it's very interesting, this concept of looking at the markets and seeing what's there and to understand the impact on biodiversity. So yeah, very interesting work. Thank you. I'm going to hand back to Stephen now. Thanks, Dinga, for our final panelist video and interview.
Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed member of International Society of Wetland Scientists, good evening. My name is Shaima Hammana, and I am thrilled to stand before you as a prospective member of this esteemed association dedicated to the conservation and sustainable management of wetlands worldwide. I'm a passionate and dedicated PhD student, candidate specializing in ecology, biodiversity, and environmental engineering. Throughout my academic journey, I have actually engaged in national scientific associations focusing on soil science and intelligent life sciences. These experiences have equipped me with a robust foundation, fostering my commitment to scientific exploration and environmental stewardship. My international exposure includes a scientific internship in Spain, establishing valuable intellectual connection in Spain, Italy, Niger, Mali, Malaysia, and Austria. These collaborations have not only broadened my perspective, but have also enriched my understanding of global environmental challenges. So in 2019, I completed my master thesis investigating the degree and impact of pollution on wetlands health through aquatic fauna. This research concentrated on the intersection of ecology and environmental health, laid the groundwork of my ongoing doctoral works. Currently, my research focuses on hydrophilic spontaneous flora or spontaneous plant species in temporary and natural wetlands in the northeastern Algeria. Simultaneously, I delved into the intricate world of mechanization within this taxa, contributing to a comprehensive research project. My work aligns seamlessly with the goals of sustainable development, addressing critical issues such as climate change, ecological education, and environmental engineering. So I should mention that all these photos are exclusive and personal one from 2019 to 2023. My motivation stems not only from personal dedications, but also from the invaluable support of my family and professors, whose unwavering encouragement fuels my field exploration laboratory endeavors and academic pursuits, like the photo shows. So I'm an active participant in international scientific communications and remains committed to staying abreast of biology and lots of environmental science, which is clear through my CV. So in joining the International Wetlands Association, I'm eager to contribute to the collective efforts aimed at preserving these vital ecosystems. I look forward to engaging with like-minded professionals, sharing insights and collectively advancing the cause of wetlands conservation. So I'd like to thank you for considering my candidacy, and I am so excited about the prospect of contributing to the impactful work of this esteemed association.
Thank you so much, Shaima, for that really informative and interesting presentation about temporary wetlands, or your research into temporary wetlands and the flora and the mycorrhizal interactions or symbiosis therein. I'm now going to share quickly a snippet of an interview that I conducted with Shaima. And if you are interested in the interview and would like to have a look at the whole thing, we can also make that available to anyone who would like to see that. I see that Shaima is also online with us, so if there are any other questions that you have for her, please do pop them into the Q&A box, and she will be able to take them afterwards. How did you find yourself in this specific field of interest? Has it always been an interest of yours growing up, or has it been something that you've developed later on in life?
I would adore everything that concerns the nature and so on. So it was my passion, let's say. I love it so much. However, for the mycorrhiza or everything that concerns the fungi, that wasn't the same case. Yeah, I didn't even know what the mycorrhiza means. So, but after that, I get into these let's say this acts and trying to develop myself more and more. I find it so funny and so interesting to working on. So it's very amazing.
Amazing. It's funny how you think you know what you want to do, and all of a sudden something else appears and just, yeah, fascinates you beyond belief.
And you to concentrate on the temporary, especially temporary response, is very amazing. The permanent one, we don't have to worry about it even for the next, let's say, the next 15 or 100 years. But the temporary one is extremely endangered, especially with the climate change problems and so on. So we really need to think about it and to put such a strategy, conservation strategies, and to start from now. And we can't put any kind of strategy or to tell any kind of plan without previous studies. So that's what we're trying to do. And now I'm trying to develop another access. I hope that will gonna be good and that's gonna success because I'm planning to get kind of collaboration with the professors in French University in Italy when I'm gonna study the prediction aspect. Okay, I have all that kind of database, but what will gonna happen after 16 or 17 years? You see, I can't speak like this. I can't say, okay, the government or the specialists, we need to collaborate and put such of these plans conservation, and I don't have nothing. I don't have a proof, the scientific proof. That's why I absolutely try and I'm interested to develop that kind of aspect. Sorry.
Amazing. And so I'm assuming because these wetlands are very temporary in the landscape, they actually have very unique plants and therefore potentially very unique mycorrhizal.
Absolutely. And the interesting thing that I'm working on places that no one have worked on it before.
Wow.
I won't give all the places, but almost of them. This is the first thing. The second thing, I have already the database of, let's say, 4 or 5 years. So I find it great for me. The database of 4 years, it's I think consider it as a good index. The second thing is that I have found such a very interesting taxa, plant taxa. For example, I found species that are protected by Algerian law legislation, and I have even found international protected flora that indexes in UCN like red list.
And you mentioned earlier that specifically these systems are at risk or are endangered, and you mentioned climate change. Is that one of the, in your opinion, is that one of the main threats to these wetlands, or are there other threats more locally in Algeria that are also encroaching on or degrading these temporary wetland types?
Let's say that climate change is an international issue international factor that exists in everything, but locally I think that, starting from the results that have been developed, the overgrazing, I think that the overgrazing is the most important factor that affects negatively and at the same time affects positively the flora distribution in that kind of plant. The overgrazing, anyone, when I say overgrazing, anyone could say directly it's negative effect, right?
Right.
But for me, it's not always the same. Sometimes it affects positively, and in other times it affects negatively. I can say that the fires as well, fires and agricultural aspect, yeah, all that factors, even the depth, okay, the altitude, the surface of the wetland itself, all that kind of factors that affect the habitat distribution and affect the ecological quality of that kind of wetland. So it depends the wetland itself and the position of this wetland.
Okay.
And
you mentioned earlier that there was you found some specific species that are protected by your government within the temporary wetlands. Are the wetlands themselves protected by legislation, or is it only the plants within them?
Unfortunately, no. Unfortunately, no. Only in the Algerian government, there is protected flora and fauna, but for the wetlands, and this is the main purpose of my work, is to put all these kind of regions under the Algerian legislation, protection, or even the international one. Why not? It's so unfortunately it's. When you see that kind of wetland with all that kind of biodiversity that exists, you feel so bad, because maybe after even 7 years, you won't even gonna find just a drop of water inside of it, and it's not an easy thing. So my main objective is to put all these under the Algerian legislation protection. That's one. And I have already worked with 2 professors from Spain, and through our work, we find that 2 kinds of regions that exist in the northeastern Algeria should be protected by now. But why? That's depending on the endemism and the bar, and even the national and international protected species that exist inside of this wetland. And also with the combination of the environmental factor that affects that natural distribution. So depending on all these kinds of biotic environmental factors, we need to put these 2 regions under the protection. We have done as a first step, and there is a lot to do it, because there's still a lot of database that should be exploited.
Amazing. I mean, that's really important work that you're doing, and if you manage to get that right, I think it would mean a huge amount for all wetlands in Algeria. And so, power to you and to your research. I hope that you get. Yeah, you managed to do that. Thank you so much, Shaima, for that interview. And I think because we're running slightly behind schedule, I'm going to jump straight into the peatland video, and then we will field a short question and answer session after that.
Wetlands globally are incredibly important to people and nature. Life thrives in wetlands, but what are they and how do peatlands differ?
Wetlands are ecosystems in the landscape that are wet either permanently or for part of the year. This makes them distinct from other terrestrial ecosystems because they have their own plants and animals that are adapted to their special wet conditions. Peatlands, on the other hand, are a type of wetland which have soils that have very high levels of plant and animal organic matter. This organic matter is usually fully decomposed or sometimes well preserved because they are permanently wet and the oxygen cannot come in to break down this organic matter. We call this buildup of organic matter peat. Peat accumulate at very slow rates, and our peatlands in South Africa are very old, ranging in age from 3,000 to 45,000 years old. Peatlands are more dramatically known for the mummification of a few human bodies, with an example being the Tullan man, who was one of Europe's most famed bog bodies.
Peatlands cover approximately 3% of the Earth's surface. The global carbon stored in peat is estimated to be about 500 billion tons, which is approximately 30% of the world's soil carbon. Peat also stores 10% of the world's fresh water.
In South Africa, we know that our peatlands provide valuable ecosystem services to people. And they're able to do so because peatlands absorb water from the landscape as water moves through that system. In so doing, they mitigate the impacts of floods and flood water. They then act basically as a high-quality carbon filter, purifying and filtering the water. They sequestrate, trap the carbon and store it, and they recharge the aquifer. Additionally, these systems are incredibly important for life, all life. And you can hear the birds, fish, amphibians such as frogs, and in macroinvertebrata. So all of these translate into significant value to us as society, to people, and especially vulnerable people that is so dependent for their livelihoods on these beautiful ecosystems.
South Africa's peatlands in particular are peculiar, as they probably shouldn't even exist here. With its relatively low rainfall and high temperatures and evaporation rates, there are few places in the country where there's enough water left over to form peatlands and to stop the breakdown of matter. Less than 10% of South Africa's wetlands are peatlands, and some are very unique. The Mfabeni Maya, for example, is 45,000 years old and is one of the oldest active peat-accumulating wetlands in the world. What do we know about where our peatlands are?
In 2001, an initiative started to try and map the peatlands of South Africa. And we've produced a peat probability map, which maps the groups of peatlands into different types, which we call peat ecoregions. We have over 635 known peatland points from samples across the country, which we use to produce this map. This map has an accuracy of 87%. Now, before this map, we had relatively little idea of how many peatlands we had and where they occurred. We still need to do a lot of work to document them all. One example of peat ecoregion is the southern coastal belt, which hosts the Onrus Palmit peatland. It's a very unique peatland with peat layers about 8 meters deep, and it's dominated by the wetland plant called palmit, occurring in the Himmel and Aarde Valley in the Western Cape. Now, this valley is predominantly a farming community, which also includes the Camp Hill Special Needs Residential Facility. Though very unique, this wetland is at risk of being lost forever.
Due to people using the landscape, we've transformed peatlands in the catchments that they occur in. What happens is they pass a point of no return, a critical threshold, and the peatlands can be lost permanently. One example is when a dam is built upstream of a peatland. This then cuts off the water supply of the peatland and the peat begins to dry out. The second example is when there's agriculture in the catchment. You can use groundwater or surface water, it takes away the water supply of the peatland, and again the peatland dries out. The third example is the invasion of alien trees, like your pines, blue gums and your wattle. They can also be planted as forestry next to a peatland, and because they use more water, the peatland dries out. All three of these examples were present at the Onrus peatland, and they combined to cause devastation. What happens is when these peatlands are deprived of water, the peat that was usually saturated becomes exposed to oxygen and begins to dry out. This results in carbon being released into the atmosphere. The drying out causes a weakness in the peatland, and when there's a rain event, can cause erosion. The nick point which forms can erode back throughout the peatland, draining it and lowering the water table, resulting in more of the peatland starting to dry out. This not only means that the peatland cannot act like a sponge anymore and no longer hold in clean water, it also makes a peatland vulnerable to peat fires. Peat fires are incredibly devastating. They are fires that occur underground and destroy peat that has taken millennia to form. It also smokes out the area and can sometimes burn for months.
Let us look now at what happened in the Onrus peat fire.
In January 2019, the Overstrand had 3 fires in our area. When myself and my colleague attended this fire and we got out of the car and stood next to the fire, we said to each other, this actually smells like the whiskey that I drink, and we immediately knew that it was a peat fire. It took us about 4 months to get the fire completely extinguished. It was so bad that we actually had to evacuate people at nearby farms because of the bad, serious air quality. We've tried to rehabilitate the site thus far, but we couldn't find any entity that's actually been able to assist us with the rehabilitation.
In 2019, this peatland behind me burned. And when peat burns, especially for a significant amount of time, it turns to ash and collapses. And when that happens, an erosion donga results. And we'd been fighting to have the donga rehabilitated to prevent further damage, but that never occurred. In 2023, we had the most severe storm that this area has ever experienced, and it washed away not just more of the peatland, but dramatically enlarged the erosion donga, extending it at least another kilometre, and also eating into the healthy peatland. Very disheartening for us and my group of volunteers who'd been monitoring the water depth in 16 points on that peatland. All that area was washed away, and we found chunks of peatland and palmy plant lying at the bottom of the Onrus River, in the estuary, on the beach, and in the sea next to the Onrus beach.
This loss is a devastating blow to the people of South Africa. We have lost a climate change mitigation machine, as no more carbon will be stored there, and huge amounts of carbon were released back to the atmosphere. It's a blow to the people living in the catchment, as they will no longer benefit from the peatland as a sponge, cleaning water and storing it, protecting downstream bridges and other infrastructure. The peatland as a biodiversity oasis is lost.
It can be very disheartening to see the damage that has been done to our peatland here. Once peat is gone, it's lost forever. We can't replace it. We can, of course, rehabilitate and allow nature to slowly build up the peat again. But once we lose our peat, it will take hundreds of thousands of years for nature to recover. So the big lesson is, let's not lose it in the first place. Prevention is better than cure. We need to urgently protect the peatlands that remain intact, and we need to protect the bit that is still healthy in this system. And we can do the rehabilitation work if we all stand together, work together, collaborate, and get the job done.
So what can we do? If you want to get involved in peatland rehabilitation, please consider either donating money to the cause or volunteering your time at a local wetlands friends group or non-profit organization. Look out for World Wetland Day events near you in February each year, and join in for biodiversity surveys or alien tree clearing. Or, if your local peatland doesn't have such a group, consider forming a WESA friends group yourself.
We need everyone's help. For people to act as watchdogs to ensure that this degradation comes to a halt, and for rehabilitation of our peatlands to take place.
We are currently in the United Nations Decade on Ecosystem Restoration. There is no better time to rehabilitate our peatlands. Let's unite as South Africans to take good care of our ecosystems. We are stronger together.
Thank you to the ARC. What a stunning collation and video. And what a wonderful way to end this collaboratory webinar. I see that we are running over time, so we will field very few or a few very quick questions. And thank you all for joining us. So I see that we have a question for Althea Grundling with regards to this video. And thank you, Althea, for joining us today to field questions about this. I see that Vulnerie Janssen van Rensburg has asked, when we know of additional peatlands or find additional peatlands in South Africa, and it is not on the map that you showed at the beginning of that video, should we report it to assist with the accuracy of the data? And also, if you, I guess the second part of the question is it possible to make the shapefile that you shared at the beginning on those maps available for those mapped peatlands?
Thank you very much for the question, and thank you for just this wonderful opportunity to be part of this webinar. To answer the question, yes, you are welcome to send your points to the ARC. We are putting together the data points that we collect. Unfortunately, we don't have a specific project, but we are listing all the sites that people record. Sometimes it's possible sites, and we still need to go and verify it. If you've got verified points with data, the depth, the date it was collected, we can send you the spreadsheet so that you can complete that spreadsheet for us. That would be very welcome. And we can make available the map that we showed in the video.
Great. Thank you. Thanks so much. And I'm sure that maybe, Althea, if you wouldn't mind sharing your email address in the chat, that might be just a nice way for Vulnerie to get in touch and to share those as well.
I can also mention that Jason Leroux, that was also featuring in the film, I will also add his email address because he puts together all the points for the database. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And then, Alana, do you want to field the other questions that we have for, I think, Dinga?
Yeah, so thank you very much, Althea, for being with us today and for your time. We've got just a couple of questions, and we'll take them very quickly, like Stephen said. Those that have to leave, we completely understand. Those that can stay on just for another very few short minutes, that would be fantastic. And this is being recorded, so you can always catch the end later. I think maybe since we've heard most recently from Cameroon, it might be nice just to address the question to Kenya first. For Damaris, she did answer it briefly in the chat. But the question was that cranes are amazing birds. Have you received any distribution status or information about them from North Africa? Damaris, do you mind just really quickly talking to that question live?
Yes, thank you very much for the question. And again, thank you for this opportunity to be in this webinar. So for the question about the distribution and the population status of cranes in northern part of America, yes, we only have the black-crowned crane besides the one that we have in Kenya. So in Ethiopia and Senegal, we have the black-crowned crane, as opposed to Kenya where we have the gray-crowned crane. And there's a team deployed in the two countries who are monitoring the population. So at this point, I don't have the exact numbers of how many they are, but we have a team that is monitoring that population in the two countries. Yes.
That's really wonderful. And do you know anything about the status? Like, are they healthy populations? Are they in decline? Do you know anything offhand?
Okay, for the black-crowned crane, it's also declining, but in the crane family, would say the gray-crowned crane is the most declining species out of the 15 globally known species of cranes.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a concerning story. Well, thank you, Damaris. Really appreciate that. And thank you for just expanding on that answer a little bit. I'm sure that it's useful for people. Let's switch now then to Cameroon. So there are two questions, and if I can ask Zinga just to assist us with those as with brief answers if possible. I thought the first question is very interesting on policy. Are there any policies on wetland management in Cameroon? Because from the pictures, it looked like there was a lot of different things going on in the wetlands. So is there anything saying you may do that in the wetland or you may not do that? The second question is, what methods do you use, if any, for assessing wetland health, functionality, and ecosystem services? So yeah, Zinga, if you could just really quickly answer that.
Okay, thank you so much. And I will start with the policy question. And like in other African countries, I say so because in the just last week, I was with an interview with some wetland expert from Rwanda. We have sort of some the same things in Africa, in some of the African countries, where the policy states it's clear. All wetlands are state lands. So that is the lullaby we have in Cameroon. So I call it now a lullaby because so many persons can recite that to you. All wetlands are state lands, but we see the degradation going on and we see the activities being carried out on them. So he portrays a kind of situation. I think some years back, I delivered a presentation for the SWS Africa again in the South African Indabal about the need for a wetland society or something in Cameroon to bring experts to try to fight this aspect, because the laws are there saying no, all wetlands are state lands. They are inalienable. The law says they are inalienable to acquisition, meaning that as their private property or everything. But we see all sort of activities, even with construction of settlements in them. So that's the situation where we find ourselves. So for policy, yes, it's there, and we can follow up. I can provide some of the policy things that are there. For the second question on the what kind of methodology we use in assessing the health and the functionality, I think during my defense late last year, one examiner asked, external examiner from another university asked about this. And what I always tell them is simple. We don't need some kind of assessment to tell us why the wetlands are degrading. I told them directly, we see it as it is degrading. So what we need to do is to try to do something to help in reducing the rate or getting people to understand. So what I did in my PhD, I did not go for the wetland functionality and assessment because it has already been disrupted, which is very clear. So I went for ecosystem service assessment, and the tool that I use is quite unusual tool, and it is I am still thinking of how to get that more developed. It was a more of a qualitative tool that tries to work with the communities to find out their priorities as regards to wetland ecosystem services. So the tool I use is what I call the community-based tool for wetland ecosystem service assessment, where I try to prioritize community perspective in just in an attempt to come out with a synthesis whether what do the communities really want, what is their interest, and why, how can we accommodate their interest. So that is in terms of assessment, that is something I did. That's why I'm going to a little bit detailed, because it's not quite of a usual tool like the SWS, the wet eco services, or the other tools. So that's a brief I can say about it, and then we can discuss more, anybody who is interested on that.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Dinga. Yeah, very well put. So yeah, you don't need to waste time assessing things. You already know what's happening. Skip straight to the solution. So I love that. And I think a lot of other countries can learn from you guys in that regard. Thank you, Dinga. I'm just going to share my last slide just to say, in terms of next steps for anyone watching this or the recording, please do take a look at our website. Consider becoming a member. It's only $10, but if that's a stumbling block, there are ways to make sure that you can become a member. There are gratis memberships, so please reach out. And please consider joining or supporting in some way our training event in Lagos this October. So with that, I'm going to hand back to Stephen.
Great. I think just a closing note from the South African Wetland Society as well. Thank you all for attending. It has really been a phenomenal tour of wetland research across our beautiful continent. And thank you to all of the panelists and researchers who have shared videos. It has just been so wonderful and inspirational to see the work that is being done. So thank you all. And yeah, just to say that also we have our next webinar scheduled for the 28th of August at the same time, 12 until 1:30, and it will be featuring Dr. Suzanne Grenfell and one of her master's students, Hannah Shamali, I think is how you pronounce it. So yeah, please look out for any communications about that. They will be communicated further on Monday. So from us, thank you all, and it's been such a pleasure. Enjoy the rest of your days and your weekends to come.